And so perhaps I want to stack the deck, it sure sounds like it, right, in favor of at-home mothers. There is much good in privileging this particular call, especially since our culture no longer does. And so principle 5 is this: mothers who are at home with their children have a blessed availability, a consistent presence and attentiveness in the lives of their young ones, their spouses, their extended family, their friends, and the broader community that is so precious and desperately needed today. And with the relative ease of housework due to industrialization, thank you, dishwasher, mothers who are not obligated to work beyond the home can still make great use of their myriad gifts through, of course, the care of their own family first and foremost, but also through their apostolates. Think Cana Vox, their volunteerism. Think Catholic schools, parishes, and soup kitchens, their community building. Think homeschool co-ops. These are the seed beds of a renewed Christian culture, dare I say, a renewed civilization. I thank God every day for the work he did through me and several other at-home mothers in founding a classical Catholic school just outside of Boston. That school, now entering its 4th year, has quadrupled in size and is a much-needed respite, as you can imagine, in our area for Catholic students and parents alike. And thankfully, the professional educators have entirely taken over. So yes, I do want to say that the duties of state of a wife and a mother require prioritizing the needs of her family. Again, this is true for husbands and fathers as well, but perhaps differently. But, and here's our 6th guiding principle: each woman, in prayerful consideration with her husband and hopefully her spiritual director, ought to discern whether in answering the prior call to sanctity, she is also called to the professional life. That is, while our duties as wives and mothers are utmost and cannot be abrogated, they must be placed in the context of our prior duties to God. For the core of our identity is not that of a wife and a mother, as essential and important as that identity is. And it's certainly not, the core of our identity is certainly not as a doctor and a lawyer or scientist. The core of our identity is always as a child, a daughter of God. And so listening to him and discerning his particular call, if you will, the size and shape and color of your particular sails, this is important, especially since we are so often called to different ways of living out our vocation at different seasons in the family, in the life of our family. It is most often in the particularities and circumstances in our lives that God makes his will known. And this is why it is so important that we never look down our nose at or compare ourselves to those who live out their vocations differently than we do. Answering God's call happens very much in the circumstances of our particular lives and may not be entirely transparent to others. So pray always for others, especially other women dealing with all of this, right? Never judge them. Sometimes our families need the income generated by our part-time or occasionally even our full-time work, especially if our professional training offers high levels of compensation or the added cost of Catholic school tuition is necessary to form and educate our children well. Sometimes the world or the church needs our particular gifts, and technology enables us to both work and maintain a needed presence in the home. Sometimes we are not blessed with children, or with few of them, and our parents or in-laws are willing and ready to lend a hand. Sometimes we are singularly capable of managing many commitments well. I knew very few of these women. Or our husband is eager or willing to have time at home, and the flexibility, or in some cases the absence of his work, allows that. Sometimes we really are better wives and mothers when we get a mental break from the often relentless nature of raising young children. And sometimes, yes, sometimes we are simply called to it, with God alone as our judge. For many of you who are still completing your studies, with marriage potentially far off and motherhood farther still, but I hope not too far, you really don't know what life will bring. And if called to marriage, none of us ultimately knows how many children the Lord will bless us with. Some women wanting many children find they struggle with infertility. Some fearful of a large brood, as I was, find themselves the grateful mother of one. Some women prepared to work find they have been given a special needs child who calls them home. Others desiring to invest fully at home feel pulled into the workforce by change of circumstances. And so knowing life is long and uncertain, knowing we will be held accountable for how we've used our gifts and answered his call, young women with the vast sea of life before them ought to prepare their rigs for living faithfully their primary vocation, whether it be marriage or single or religious life, and prepare too for a profession. And allow your vocational discernment to go hand in hand with your professional discernment. If you see God calling you to the rigors of academic research or specialized medicine or another profession that requires unyielding devotion, perhaps, though talk to your spiritual director, that single life is for you. If you recognize God's call to marriage with some ease, try to seek out a profession that makes use of your talents but also gives you the flexibility to enter, exit, and re-enter professional life as needed when your children are young or more fully when they are less dependent on you. And then undertake your studies and your profession with gusto, knowing that is the work that God has placed before you. But be ambitious for his will alone, not fame or prestige or riches. Ask him what he wants of you, telling him daily that you wish only to be his instrument. And examine your conscience on this point, rectifying your intention, asking him to use you for his glory alone. And then watch him make possible all that he calls you to. When we live by God's grace, doing as he would have us, keeping free from the myriad temptations for distraction, listening to the nudgings of the Holy Spirit to be faithful to the particular duty of the moment, being present and working to fulfill that duty with love, and then praying through all of it, time does seem to multiply, enabling us to do more than we thought possible, and we are gifted with clarity of mind and purpose in our undertaking. God's presence seems to make simple what ought to be difficult. The wind is at our back, and we become immersed in gratitude for all God does through us, often, again, very much in spite of us. So I want to end with 3 final thoughts that have been very helpful to me in my life. First, and I can't emphasize this point enough, choose your husband well. Find a man who adores you but loves God even more. A man who fears the Lord will want to be faithful to him in all things. And you will want to discern these questions together, making sure you really listen to his perspective and work together to put the good of your marriage and family ahead of all else. But share too your heart when it comes to God's call to professional work. The bond you have with your husband, the confidence you place in him and he in you, is the key to faithfully living out your distinctive vocation. My husband, whose love of God and fondness for young children was a great real attraction for me. He's always been my biggest fan and support, and I hope he would say the same for me. And this is as it should be. One very practical note: as you plan your lives together, think hard about how you can order your financial world around one salary, if at all possible. Once you have children, you'll be glad you did. Second, find a community of faith in which you can be held accountable, be of service, and grow into the person God has called you to be. If your parish is alive and your priest willing to offer you spiritual direction, by all means, take advantage of that gift. But also learn about the third orders of religious communities and the particular charisms of the church's many lay movements. Find a spiritual director who challenges you, and then follow a spiritual plan of life, making sure you make ample room for prayer each day. And remember that we are always at our best when we get out of ourselves and help another. Finally, learn the practice of offering to God and thereby sanctifying all the work you do, from writing a paper to caring for a child at night to engaging clients at a meeting to folding laundry. All our efforts, when joined to God, with God, through prayer, become far more effective and yield untold spiritual benefits. As one who had earned 2 advanced degrees, at God's bidding it seemed at the time, with little financial outlay and much inspired energy for professional work, but a real desire to be home with my children when they were young, I often wondered early on, despairing at times, how God would pull the many lines of my life together. After I married in the 2nd year of law school, children arrived, it seemed, at a breakneck pace. with the first in tow as I received my law diploma. Walking across this, I wouldn't recommend that. I can tell you that humanly speaking, I should not have been capable of much of what I've accomplished, or truth be told, what God has accomplished through me. I truly believe it has been faithfulness to the needs of my family, to daily mass as much as I can, and to the rosary, as well as the prayer offered through the most mundane of household tasks, that have provided the fuel for my intermittent, and now that my children are a bit older, more consistent intellectual work. At times of angst, I have returned again and again to a favorite quote by Saint Josemaria Escriva, the patron saint of ordinary life. Persevere in the exact fulfillment of the obligations of the moment. That work, humble, monotonous, small, is prayer expressed in action that prepares you to receive the grace of that other work, great and wide and deep, of which you dream. So prepare your rig well, hoist the sails of your talents, and go out courageously onto the wide open seas of life, trusting amidst uncertain conditions and what will often seem like bitter winds, that God's grace is with you, seeking to make use of all that you are as an instrument of his grace and love. And one day, by his grace, your ship will reach the shores of beatitude. The bitter winds will lift and all will be calm. And you, faithful daughter of God, heir to the throne, will be welcomed into paradise. And pray for me too, that I may meet you there. Thank you, and God bless.